You know what they say about finding abandoned facilities in the Outer Rim? Don't. Just don't do it. But did we listen? Of course not. Because we are Krallari, and we are supposedly the smartest species in this sector of the galaxy. What a joke that turned out to be. My name is Vec, and I'm what you might call a salvage specialist. Though after today, I'm seriously considering a career change. Maybe farming. Farming sounds peaceful. No ancient prisons. No angry humans. Just nice, quiet vegetables that don't threaten to rip your head off. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It started 3 days ago when our scout ship, the Silver Wing, picked up an energy signature from a dead system. The kind of signature that screams valuable technology inside. Come and get rich. Zara, our pilot, was practically bouncing in her seat when she saw the readings. Vec, look at this. She chirped, her 4 eyes glittering with excitement. It's massive. Whatever's down there has been running on backup power for, oh my stars, 200 years. I should have turned the ship around right then. 200 years of backup power? That's not normal. That's not even close to normal. But no, greed won over common sense, as it always does with our kind. Set us down near the facility, I told her, already calculating how much we could sell whatever we found. Talk, Nem. Gear up, we are going in. Talk grumbled something about another wild goose chase while checking his plasma rifle. He's our muscle, though calling a Krallari muscle is like calling a twig sturdy. We are not exactly built for combat. We are built for thinking, for technology, for being annoyingly superior to everyone else in the galaxy. Or so we thought. Nim, our tech specialist, was already pulling up schematics on her datapad. The facility appears to be some kind of detention center, she reported, her voice clinical and precise. Though the design is strange, very crude, almost primitive. Primitive means easy to break into, I said, feeling confident. And easy to break into means easy money. Oh, how wrong I was. The facility squatted on the planet's surface like a metal tumor. All angles and harsh edges, with none of the elegant curves we Krallari prefer in our architecture. It looked functional, utilitarian, unpleasantly human. Human? Readings indicate the main power source is nearly depleted, Nem announced as we approached the entrance. Whatever's been running in there, it's been running for a very long time. The doors were sealed with what appeared to be some kind of primitive magnetic lock. Primitive to us, anyway. Nem had it open in under 5 minutes, though she did mutter something about unnecessarily robust security protocols while she worked. The interior was dark, cold, and filled with the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. The emergency lighting flickered along the corridors, casting strange shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. Cheerful place, Talk muttered, his rifle at the ready. Remind me why we couldn't find a nice, abandoned jewelry store instead? Because jewelry stores don't run on backup power for 2 centuries, I replied, though I was starting to share his sentiment. The whole place felt wrong, like we were intruding somewhere we shouldn't be. We followed the main corridor deeper into the facility, past what looked like administrative offices and guard stations. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, except for one thing: the air recycling system was still humming softly in the walls. That's odd, Nem observed, checking her instruments. The life support systems are still fully operational. Why would a detention facility maintain life support for 200 years if it was abandoned? I was about to answer when we found the answer ourselves. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, and what we saw there made us all stop dead in our tracks. Rows upon rows of cryopods, stretching out as far as our enhanced vision could see. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And according to Nem's readings, most of them were still active. By the 7 moons, Zara whispered. What is this place? I walked closer to the nearest pod, my heart hammering against my ribs. The viewing window was frosted over, but I could make out a shape inside. Humanoid, bipedal, and very much alive. "It's a prison," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "A cryo-prison. They froze the prisoners instead of killing them." "Who would do such a thing?" Talk asked, and for once his usual sarcasm was completely absent. That's when Nem screamed. We spun around to see her backing away from one of the pods, her datapad clattering to the floor. The pod she'd been examining was different from the others, newer, better maintained, and according to the display panel on its side, it was in the middle of an automated wake-up sequence. "How long?" I demanded, grabbing her by the shoulders. 10 minutes, she stammered. "Maybe less." The power fluctuations from our entry must have triggered some kind of fail-safe protocol. "Can we stop it?" "I don't know. The system is completely alien to me. The technology it's so primitive, but it's also so robust. It's like they built this thing to run forever." The pod was starting to emit a low humming sound, and frost was beginning to melt away from the viewing window. We could see more clearly now. The occupant was definitely humanoid, but larger than any species we'd encountered. Broader shoulders, thicker limbs, and even unconscious, there was something about its posture that suggested coiled violence. "What's that marking on the pod?" Zara asked, pointing to a series of symbols etched into the metal. Nem picked up her datapad with shaking hands and ran a translation protocol. Her face went pale. Well, paler than usual for a Kralari. It says Jake Morrison. Sentence, indefinite detention. Crime, acts of terrorism against the Terran Colonial Authority. Warning, subject is extremely dangerous and should not be awakened under any circumstances. Terran, I repeated. "That means," human talk finished, and his voice carried a note I'd never heard before. Fear. We'd all heard stories about humans, of course. Every species in the galaxy had. They were the bogeyman parents used to scare their children into behaving, the unstoppable warriors who fought wars they couldn't win and somehow won them anyway. The species that looked at impossible odds and said, "Hold my beverage," before doing something completely insane that somehow worked. But those were just stories, myths, legends designed to make humans seem more impressive than they actually were. Weren't they? The humming from the pod grew louder, and we could see movement inside now. The human was waking up. "We need to leave," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Right now." But it was too late. The pod's lid hissed open, releasing a cloud of cryo-vapor that smelled like ozone and something indefinably organic. And then a hand appeared over the edge of the pod. A human hand, with 5 fingers instead of our 4, and skin that looked disturbingly durable. The hand was followed by an arm, then a shoulder, and finally a head. The human sat up slowly, blinking in the dim light, and that's when I got my first good look at a member of the species that had somehow conquered half the galaxy before mysteriously disappearing 2 centuries ago. He was unimpressive, honestly. Smaller than I'd expected, though still larger than any of us. His skin was a pinkish-brown color, and his hair was brown and slightly matted from the cryo-fluid. 2 eyes, which was normal, though they were a strange blue color that seemed to catch and hold the light. For a moment I allowed myself to relax. This wasn't the terrifying monster from the stories. This was just a person. A bit bigger than us, sure, but nothing we couldn't handle if it came to that. Then he opened his mouth and spoke, and that's when I realized we were all going to die. 200 years, he said, his voice rough from the long sleep but carrying an undertone of barely controlled rage that made my blood freeze. 200 years of dreams about what I was going to do when I got out. He climbed out of the pod with movements that looked casual but contained a fluid grace that spoke of perfect body control, like a predator pretending to be harmless. "And the first thing I see when I wake up," he continued, looking directly at us with those unsettling blue eyes, "is a bunch of Xenos rifling through my prison." Xenos. That was what humans called non-human species. It wasn't exactly a compliment. We didn't know. I stammered, trying to project calm authority and failing miserably. "We are salvage specialists. We thought this facility was abandoned. The human's mouth curved upward in what might have been a smile if it hadn't been so terrifying. Abandoned? Oh no, friend. This place was never abandoned. It was just forgotten. There's a difference. He started walking toward us, and every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. But I couldn't move. None of us could. We were frozen in place like small animals facing an apex predator. You see, the human continued conversationally. When the colonial authority collapsed, they left a lot of loose ends. Unfinished business. People like me, stored away in cold sleep, waiting for our trials that never came, waiting for justice that never arrived. Just waiting. He stopped about 3 meters away from us, close enough that I could see the details of his face. There were scars there, old ones, and his eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that made me understand why humans had been so feared. But I wasn't just waiting, Jake Morrison said, and now his voice carried a tone that made my bones ache. I was planning, dreaming, imagining all the things I was going to do when I finally got free. We can leave, Zara said quickly. We can just leave and pretend we never found this place. The human tilted his head slightly, like he was considering this. Oh, you are going to leave, all right. But not quite yet. You see, I have been asleep for 200 years, and I have some questions. Questions about what happened to my species, about what happened to Earth, about who's running things now. The Galactic Council, Niam said before I could stop her. It's a coalition of species that maintains order and trade throughout known space. A coalition, Jake repeated slowly. How nice. And I suppose humans have a seat on this council. The silence stretched out until it became painful. I see, the human said finally. So my people are either extinct, enslaved, or so marginalized that they don't even rate a mention in galactic politics. Interesting. He began to pace back and forth in front of us, and I noticed that he moved with the easy confidence of someone who had spent a lot of time in dangerous situations. Every step was placed precisely. Every movement was economical and controlled. You know what the funny thing is? He asked, though his tone suggested that nothing about this situation was actually funny. I wasn't even that important when they froze me. Just a low-level resistance fighter with a talent for making things go boom. They probably forgot about me 5 minutes after they stuffed me in that pod. He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. But here's the thing about humans, Xenos. Yeah, we don't forget. We don't forgive. And we sure as hell don't give up. So when you wake up one of us after 2 centuries of forced sleep, you better be prepared for the consequences. Talk. Bless his foolish heart. Finally found his courage. Or maybe he just snapped under the pressure. Either way, he raised his plasma rifle and pointed it at the human. Stay back, he shouted. I'm warning you. Jake Morrison looked at the weapon, then at Talk, and then he did something that will haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. He laughed. Meh. Not a nervous laugh, or a crazy laugh, but a genuine, deeply amused laugh, like Talk had just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. Oh, that's adorable, the human said, wiping what might have been tears from his eyes. You are pointing a plasma rifle at me. That takes me back. Do you know what plasma rifles were to humans? Training weapons. We gave them to our children to play with. Before any of us could react, Jake Morrison moved. One moment he was standing 3 meters away, apparently relaxed and harmless. The next moment he was right next to Talk. The plasma rifle was in pieces on the floor, and Talk was suspended in the air by his throat. Now then, the human said pleasantly, as if he wasn't casually strangling one of my crew members with one hand, let's have a proper conversation, starting with where exactly I am, what year it is, and whether any of my people are still alive. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. My brain seemed to have shut down completely. This was supposed to be a simple salvage operation. Find some abandoned technology, sell it for a profit, maybe take a nice vacation afterward. Not this. Definitely not this. Cat got your tongue? Jake asked, then paused. Wait, Do you people even have cats? Or tongues, for that matter? He released Talk, who collapsed to the floor, gasping and clutching his throat. The human barely spared him a glance before turning his attention back to the rest of us. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice taking on a businesslike tone that was somehow more terrifying than his earlier anger. You are going to tell me everything I want to know. Then you are going to help me get off this rock. And if you are very, very lucky, I might let you live long enough to warn the rest of the galaxy that Jake Morrison is awake, he's angry, and he's coming for answers. He smiled again, and this time there was nothing human about it at all. After all, he said softly, someone needs to pay for 200 years of stolen time. And I have got a feeling the Galactic Council is a good place to start collecting. That's when I realized that finding this facility wasn't the worst mistake we'd ever made. Waking up the human was. If someone had told me 3 days ago that I'd be sitting in my own cargo hold, tied up with my own restraint cables, watching a 200-year-old human casually dismantle my ship's security systems, I would have suggested they see a mind healer. Yet here I was, doing exactly that. Jake Morrison worked with the focused intensity of someone who knew precisely what he was doing. Which was disturbing, considering our technology should have been completely alien to him. Apparently, humans had this annoying habit of adapting to new situations with terrifying speed. Fascinating, he murmured, pulling apart another control panel. You have made some interesting advances in quantum processing, though your security protocols are laughably primitive. Did no one ever teach your species about redundant encryption? Our security systems are rated Class 5 by the Galactic Standards Authority, Nem said indignantly, forgetting for a moment that she was tied up and at the mercy of an apex predator. Jake paused in his work and looked at her with something that might have been pity. Class 5. How adorable. Humans were using Class 12 encryption 200 years ago, and that was just for our grocery lists. He went back to his work, humming something under his breath. A human song, presumably. It was actually quite pleasant, which somehow made the whole situation even more unsettling. So, he said conversationally, not looking up from the tangle of wires he was sorting through, the Galactic Council. Tell me about them. Who's in charge? What's their military capability? How do they handle troublemakers? There are 12 member species, I said, figuring that cooperation was probably my best chance of survival. The Altarians handle most of the administration. The Zenthari provide military force. Trade is regulated by... I don't care about trade, Jake interrupted. Military. Focus on military. Numbers, technology, fleet strength. The Zenthari maintain approximately 50,000 vessels across their territory, Nem provided. They are considered the premier military force in known space. Jake snorted. 50,000. Cute. The human colonial fleet numbered over 2 million ships at its peak. And that was just our exploration arm. That's impossible, Talk croaked, his voice still rough from being strangled. No species could support that kind of fleet. No species except humans, Jake corrected. See, here's what you people never understood about us. We don't just adapt to environments. We adapt them to us. Every world we touched became a shipyard. Every asteroid became a mining station. Every moon became a fortress. We didn't just colonize space. We conquered it. He pulled out a component that sparked briefly before going dark. There we go. Your quantum communicator just suffered a tragic and completely accidental malfunction. No calling for help, I'm afraid. What do you want from us? Zara asked, and I could hear the barely controlled panic in her voice. Jake finally looked up from his work, and those blue eyes seemed to look right through us. Information, transportation, and a front row seat to watch me remind the galaxy why humans used to be feared. You are one person, I said, trying to inject some reason into the conversation. What can one person do against an entire galactic civilization? A terrible smile appeared on his face again. Oh, Vic. That's the beautiful thing about humans. We are never just one person. You see, when the colonial authority fell, they scattered us across the galaxy, froze some of us, exiled others, tried to break us up and make us disappear. He stood up and stretched, joints popping audibly. But here's the thing about humans. We find each other. Always. It's like a biological imperative. We'll put humans anywhere in the galaxy, and eventually they will form a network, a community, a family. That was 200 years ago, Nim pointed out. Any humans from your time would be dead? Maybe. But humans reproduce, sweetheart. And we teach our children. We tell them stories. We make sure they remember where they came from and who they are. Jake walked over to one of our navigation consoles and began inputting commands with disturbing familiarity. So here's my theory. Somewhere out there, scattered across the galaxy, are the descendants of the humans who survived the fall. They are probably living quiet lives, hiding, pretending to be harmless, waiting. Waiting for what? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. For someone like me to wake up and remind them what they really are. The navigation system chimed softly, and a star map appeared on the main display. Jake studied it for a moment, then pointed to a cluster of systems near the galactic core. There, he said with satisfaction. According to your databases, there have been 16 unexplained incidents in this sector over the past 50 years. Ships disappearing, stations going offline. The kind of things that happen when someone very skilled wants to stay hidden but occasionally needs resources. You think there are humans there? Zara asked. I know there are humans there. The pattern is too clean, too professional to be anything else. Pirates would be messier. Rebels would be more obvious. But humans? He grinned. Humans would do exactly this. Stay quiet, stay hidden, and slowly build their strength while everyone else forgot they existed. He input more commands, and I watched in horror as our ship's course changed. We were heading for the core systems, heading for whatever Jake Morrison thought he would find there. Now then, he said, turning back to us, here's how this is going to work. You are going to take me to that sector. You are going to help me make contact with whoever's hiding out there. And in return, I won't space you. And if we refuse? Talk asked, apparently having recovered some of his courage. Jake's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the cargo hold seemed to drop several degrees. Then I will space you anyway, take control of your ship, and do it myself. The only difference is that cooperation might earn you the chance to walk away from this alive. You are talking about starting a war, I said. The Galactic Council has kept peace for over a century. Peace, Jake repeated, and there was something in his voice that made me shiver. Is that what you call it? Tell me, Vic, in this peaceful galaxy of yours, what happened to my people? Where are the humans? Why aren't we represented in your precious council? I opened my mouth to answer, but realized I didn't have one. Humans had simply disappeared. There were theories, of course. Some said they'd retreated to unknown regions. Others claimed they'd transcended physical existence somehow. A few suggested they'd simply died out. But looking at Jake Morrison, I was beginning to suspect the truth was much simpler and much more terrifying. You killed us, he said quietly. Maybe not directly. Maybe not all at once. But you killed us. Systematically. Quietly. Made us disappear so thoroughly that most species probably don't even remember we existed. That's not, I started to protest, but he cut me off. Do you know what humans call genocide, Vic? Tuesday. We had a word for it because it happened to us so often throughout our history that we had to categorize it. And every single time some of us survived. Every single time we came back. He leaned closer, and I could smell something on his breath that might have been cryofluid or might have been barely controlled rage. The thing is, when you commit genocide against humans, you better make sure you get all of us. Because if even one survives, if even one remembers, then eventually someone's going to pay the price. The ship shuddered slightly as we entered hyperspace, and Jake straightened up with obvious satisfaction. Estimated travel time to the target sector is 18 hours, he announced cheerfully, as if he hadn't just threatened to restart a galactic war. I suggest you all get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a very interesting day. You are insane, Nim whispered. Jake considered this for a moment. Maybe. 200 years of forced sleep will do that to a person. But here's the thing about crazy humans. We are the dangerous kind of crazy. The kind that looks at impossible odds and decides to make them someone else's problem. He walked over to the wall and activated the ship's internal communication system. Attention, whatever's listening. My name is Jake Morrison, former sergeant in the human colonial marines, current very angry prisoner. If there are any humans receiving this transmission, if any of you remember the old protocols, if any of you still care about what we used to be, then listen carefully. His voice changed, taking on a formal tone that somehow carried the weight of military authority. This is authentication code Tango 77 Bravo Charlie 9. Ghost Protocol is now active. Repeat, Ghost Protocol is now active. The sleeping giant is awake, and it's time to come home. The transmission ended, and Jake turned back to us with that terrifying smile. Now we wait, he said, and hope that somewhere out there someone still remembers what those words mean. 18 hours later, we dropped out of hyperspace in what should have been an empty system. Instead, we found ourselves surrounded by 47 ships of clearly human design, their weapons trained on us from every conceivable angle. Well, Jake said, looking at the display with obvious satisfaction, that was faster than expected. A communication request came through, and Jake accepted it without hesitation. The image that appeared on our screen was unmistakably human. Female, middle-aged, with the same predatory intelligence in her eyes that Jake possessed. Jake Morrison, she said, and there was something in her voice that might have been relief or might have been grief. We thought you were dead. Not dead, Commander Walsh, just sleeping. Though I have to say, I'm not particularly happy about being awakened by Xenos. Neither are we. Report. Jake's demeanor changed instantly, snapping to attention in a way that made it clear he was still very much a soldier. The galaxy has forgotten us, ma'am. Humans have been erased from the historical record. The Galactic Council maintains order without our input or consent. I believe we may have been the victims of a systematic extermination campaign. Commander Walsh's expression hardened. Confirmed. We have been monitoring galactic communications for decades. Official records show humanity as extinct due to internal conflicts. Unofficially, we have identified at least 12 separate incidents where human colonies were accidentally destroyed by Council forces. Survivors? Scattered across 19 systems. Approximately 2 million souls, all told. We have been preparing for this day, Jake. Waiting for someone like you to wake up and give us permission to stop hiding. Jake turned to look at us, and there was nothing human in his expression anymore. There was only cold, calculating fury. Permission granted, Commander. It's time to remind the galaxy what happens when you try to extinct humanity. Understood, sir. Ghost Fleet is fully operational and ready for your orders. Then let's begin, Jake Morrison said, and his smile was the last thing I saw before the world went white. When I woke up, I was alone in a life pod, drifting in space near a communication beacon. My crew was in similar pods nearby, all of us alive but thoroughly humiliated. There was a message waiting for us, recorded in Jake's voice. Tell the Galactic Council that the humans are back. Tell them that we remember everything. Tell them that 200 years of stolen time demands payment, and the bill is coming due. The message paused, and when it resumed, Jake's voice carried a note of dark humor. Oh, and Vec. Thanks for the wake-up call. I really needed that. The life pods were picked up 3 days later by a Council rescue ship. By then, the first human raids had already begun. Across the galaxy, forgotten colonies were awakening. Hidden fleets were emerging from the dark between stars. And somewhere out there, Jake Morrison was reminding the universe why humanity had once ruled half the known galaxy. The war lasted 18 months. When it was over, there were 13 seats on the Galactic Council instead of 12, and Jake Morrison was sitting in one of them, still smiling that terrible smile. As for me, I kept my promise to warn everyone about what was coming. Not that it mattered. You can't fight a species that treats extinction as a minor inconvenience and comes back angrier than before. I did take up farming, by the way. It's peaceful work.